flash up? Number 4. My Jesus, I love thee. Yeah, yeah. Sorry. Nick's giving me the eyeball because we're late. There's a medley that we have sung a couple times, My Jesus, I Love Thee. Would you stand and sing it with us as we begin this evening? Join us now as we welcome each other to our evening day service.
As you've made it back towards your seats, does anybody need one of the charts? Ken is holding them in his hand. If you'll hold that so they can see it, Ken. One of the ones that charts the Bible translations. So if you'll stick your hand up, Matt Frederick had his hand up. These are ones that we've had throughout this series, and so you can stick that into your Bible or anything like that. Just hold your hand up till Ken gets around to you while we take prayer concerns. If the blood goes out of your hand, just raise your other hand and put that arm down. So there you go. Good job. Keith's over here doing his exercises. He's doing Pilates or calisthenics or something. So as a few people are getting those, we're going to take your prayer concerns. Just to mention a couple, I went and saw Janet Vellini this afternoon. when they hear this. I just saw a small girl come running through the bathroom area by herself. And I thought, oh no, and I'm not going to say which twin it was, but no, actually it was Leah. For once in her life, Kate was walking with the adult and was not in my view because of this center post here. And I watched and I was like, so I'm trying to make sure there's an adult and that she hasn't just escaped, because Leah's not the one that you normally have to worry about that with. It would be Kate. And then I see Kate and Judy just walking real slow. And I thought, how in the world did she get Kate to walk that slow? And so it was just adorable, because Leah must have had to really go. So she was leaving them behind. So tonight we are in our last message or study on paraphrases. And so, Daryl, do you have the PowerPoint tonight? Okay. I left the choir this morning because I evidently didn't put the PowerPoint for this morning's message in the network so Daryl could get it. So he texted me while I'm singing that first song and said, I don't have your PowerPoint. So I had to leave to go get it. So I wanted to make sure we at least had it tonight up there. But tonight we are in this last message on our series on translations. We're looking at paraphrases. And so before we get into the paraphrases, I'm going to answer one of the questions that Alta had sort of asked us about. And this will help us when we're looking at the comparison texts tonight. But Alta had asked the question about, it is where the scripture in Romans 12:1 asks or says reasonable service or spiritual worship, and we talked about how those are two completely different thought patterns, two completely different viewpoint or statements. And so I went and looked in the Greek dictionary, it's a lexicon, to look and see what those words are. And so the word for reasonable, what is translated in the King James Version as reasonable, is logikos, which we get logic from. And so you could see where that would be reasonable. It means pertaining to speech, pertaining to reason. It also means spiritual. So it can mean a couple different things. Like a lot of words in the Greek, they can mean a lot of different things. So it can be reasonable. It can be interpreted that way or translated that way, and it can be interpreted or translated as spiritual. So both of those are words that it's a matter of the translators, and possibly, again, how the manuscripts, whether it's the older ones or the newer ones, how they traditionally interpret those. So it could be reason or reasonable or spiritual. But the other word, latreia, means service or the service and worship of God. So it could be your spiritual service, your spiritual worship. It could be your reasonable service, your reasonable worship. So when we look at Romans 12:1, tonight is a little different because the only modern translation that we're using that is a translation, not a paraphrase, is the NASB. We're not going to have the KJV and the NIV like we've done, because we're going to look at two paraphrases tonight and how they paraphrase the text. But when we get to Romans 12:1, you'll see that it says this is your spiritual worship. To make yourselves this holy living sacrifice, this is your reasonable service, as the King James says, or your spiritual worship, which is what most of the modern translations say. So I'll hand these notes off to you, Alta, afterwards, and y'all can look at it. And I do have an answer for your Reformed theology or Reformed ESV question as well. It must be on my desk, but I'll get that for you too. Tonight we're looking at paraphrases. Let me ask you, how many of you use a paraphrase, whether it's the Living Bible, the Message, or anything like that? We've got a handful of people, and I've had some that have asked after one of the first times when I mentioned that you should, probably stay away from paraphrases to some degree. I had several ask me, "Well, Pastor, what's so wrong about them?" And so we started talking about it, and I'm going to explain myself, I guess is the best way to put it tonight, as to what I didn't finish that sentence of you should stay away from a paraphrase. And I didn't finish it, and so I'm going to finish it tonight. That was a really bad lead-in from weeks ago when I said you shouldn't use them, and then try to explain tonight why you can. But many people use paraphrases. And as we said, they are a paraphrase of the original text. And so, but paraphrases are used a lot by many people for devotional reading and things like that. And so tonight, as we're looking at paraphrases, we're going to primarily look at two. The two that we're going to look at are the Message and the Living Bible. And you'll see the time frames of those. The Message is much newer, by about 30 years, than the Living Bible. On your chart here, if you look to the right, all the way in the red where it says paraphrase, you'll see that the Message is about as paraphrasical. Sounds like a good word. Had I not shown my cards, you would have thought I knew what I was talking about. But it is it's a paraphrases paraphrase, let's put it that way. So, but then you see the Living Bible is next to that. The CEV, which is the Contemporary English Version, and the Good News Translation, or the Good News Bible, those two, the CEV and the GNT, those are both described by the publishers as thought for thought. There are other people who consider them paraphrases. And so if you remember when we looked at the NLT, which is just to the left of that, when we looked at the NLT, even though it was a mix between word for word and thought for thought, it was very heavy on the thought for thought. Well, it was just thought for thought. And it's, borderline paraphrase in some of its text. So you can imagine if that's what the NLT was, how much more the Message and the Living Bible are on that paraphrase spectrum, leaning way over that way. So tonight, as we look at this, we're going to look like we always do at the translation method and the reading level. And it's a paraphrase, which is, it's not word for word. It's not even thought for thought, but it is a paraphrase. When we think of a paraphrase, it's exactly what it is. It is someone's thoughts on how you interpret that and what the idea is that's trying to be passed along. The two paraphrases that we're looking at tonight, I think they were like 6th and 7th grade reading levels, I think, or almost 7th grade level. So that's something that will play in later on our understanding of one of the benefits or the pros of a paraphrase, is that it's on a very low reading level, meaning that it is easy to read. And if it's easy to read, what is it easy to what? It's easy to understand. And so that's important when we're thinking about, devotional reading and things like that. And so as you'll see tonight, going forward, if you see MSG, we're not talking about the bad thing from the Chinese food. We're talking about the Message. And if you see TLB, that was right, wasn't it? MSG, ain't that? That's the bad stuff in China. Okay, my wife's over here shaking her head like, you're an idiot. And I thought it was because I said something wrong. It's just because I used an example she didn't like. But TLB is obviously the Living Bible. And so as far as the years, Daryl, if you'll show that, the Message was originally released just 21 years ago. It was revised in 2018. And the Living Bible was originally released in 1971. And as best I can tell, there's never been an official revision of the Living Bible. But if you remember, the Living Bible was the English translation basis for the New Living Translation. Now, the New Living Translation is not a paraphrase. Remember, they took everything they could to make it a thought for thought rather than a paraphrase. And so the best option for a revision of the Living Bible would be the New Living Translation in 1996. But it's not officially a revision because that's a translation and the Living Bible is a paraphrase. And so we have those. As far as the translators go, there was one translator for both. Now, let me ask you something. If you have one translator, and I use the term translator very carefully there, because if you're a paraphraser, maybe rather than a translator, but with there being one author for each of those, would you rather have a Bible or a paraphrase or a translation where multiple scholars have pored over it, or do you want to just take one person's word for it? And I'm not being critical of these two. I'm saying that is something that would give me pause or give me, some concern about how I use this, because you're talking about Eugene Peterson or Kenneth Taylor, both, accomplished in the field of, what they do, but still that's one person's perspective. And so, my perspective on how to paraphrase something may be different than Terry's or different than Matthew's or anybody else's. So that is something to keep in mind. Now, the difference between the two is that Kenneth Taylor, when he did the Living Bible, as far as I can tell, there was no one else involved in his paraphrasing of the Bible. Eugene Peterson had 20 scholars review his work. So he at least had somebody to, it wasn't just him that had eyes on it, but he is the only one that is given credit as having written it and that sort of thing. So there were some scholars that reviewed the work. As far as the sponsors go, for the Message, it was Nav Press. That is the publishing house, and Eugene Peterson is given credit for helping get that published. But then Tyndale House Publishers is the one who did the Living Bible, and Kenneth Taylor worked at Tyndale House when he finished the Living Bible, and they naturally were given the publishing rights to it. And I think one of these two, I can't remember which one, because it's hard keeping two of them straight, much less just one of them straight. I think that Tyndale House owns the rights to the Living Bible, and Kenneth Taylor never took any royalties from it. He never had any money come into it from himself. It was actually set up for charity, so that Tyndale House and a charity would receive all the future royalties on sales. And so that is kind of interesting. I don't know about the Message. It's just that was something that I remember noticing. I'm pretty sure it was the Living Bible that was that way. So we've been talking every night about, every time we've looked at a translation, we've talked about, well, what was their basis for making their translation? When it came to the Living Bible, the English Bible that they used was the American Standard Version, the 1901 edition. And so Kenneth Taylor took the ASV, and that was what he used as his English base for paraphrasing the Bible. And so it wasn't the King James, it wasn't a different translation. But what he did there was he did make comparisons of other translations, including the King James Version and some Greek text. But his primary document that he went about paraphrasing was the American Standard Version. And so it's not one that we looked at, but it is a reliable version of the Bible. And so that's kind of interesting that he only had one source that he primarily used. So if you look at the Living Bible and you wonder what he paraphrased, it wasn't the original Greek, it wasn't the original Hebrew. He paraphrased a 1901 version of the Bible, which is fine. Now it's a paraphrase, and so that's what he used. As far as the Message goes, again, the Living Bible didn't have an English translation. There wasn't one the Message did not have an English translation that he used. Eugene Peterson went straight to the Hebrew Bible, and Darrell, if you'll go ahead and flip to the next one, he also used a Greek New Testament. And so he went and used original languages when he wrote his paraphrase, but again, he didn't use an English translation to paraphrase. And so the challenge there is the fact that he was paraphrasing in the English what was written in the Greek and the Hebrew. And so he's either brilliant, which he obviously has to be to have done some of this, or just a glutton for punishment, because I don't know how you could easily paraphrase what is written in the Greek or Hebrew and then translate it into a paraphrase without doing word for word, without doing even thought for thought. And so Eugene Peterson did at least use the original text and didn't base it off of an English translation. But then if you're doing an English paraphrase, you'd almost say you need to use an English translation. So there's pros and cons from the text basis for both of them. considering it's a paraphrase and not a true translation from the original languages to modern English. And so as far as the purpose for why these were written, the message, as one source says, it was created to recreate the common language in which the Bible was written into today's common language. And, you know, that would be sort of what you would want from any translation, but this is, again, a paraphrase. You know, you would want whatever the common language that was used in the Bible, whether it was the Hebrew or the Greek, you would want it into the modern English, the common language of today. And that's the benefit of the translations that we've looked at, is that the NASB, the ESV, the NIV, the New King James, all of those are in modern English. And so they have done exactly what the message wanted to accomplish, but did it word for word, or at least word for word and thought for thought. And so that's for the message. I don't have a slide for the Living Bible because it was a lot more than would fit on one slide. But here is the purpose for the Living Bible. Taylor was inspired to write or paraphrase the Bible and produce the Living Bible after doing devotions for his kids. From what I could understand of this example from an interview that he did 50, 60 years ago, what happened was, well, probably 50 years ago, he did these devotions with his children and would use either the King James Version or the Revised Standard Version. So he would use one of those two to do his devotions with his children. And the kids had a hard time answering questions about the family reading that they were doing on devotion. So he'd be reading from the King James Version, and he said in the interview that he asked his kids questions based off of what he had read, and he said the kids couldn't answer it. They didn't understand the King James Version, and they didn't understand the RSV. They didn't understand it from that. So what he noticed, though, that when he paraphrased it for them, they very quickly could answer the questions. And so what he decided to do as sort of a test case was he went and he paraphrased the nightly devotional that they were going to be doing. He paraphrased it for them, and then when they came in and they did their devotion, and he read the paraphrase to them and then asked them the questions. They had no problem. They got all of them correct. They easily understood it. So sort of the light bulb goes off in his head. Well, if they can't adequately read this older text, this older version of English at a young age and comprehend it, they would at the paraphrase. So I'm just going to do that. So what he started doing was he started paraphrasing it, and it built itself into this big project that he worked on and eventually turned into the Living Bible. And so that was the unique circumstances of the purpose of the Living Bible, and I thought that was really interesting. But we also have been looking each night at some interesting facts about our translations and our paraphrases. This one was one that I came across. If you look in the Living Bible in 1 Samuel 24:3, Kenneth Taylor said, Saul went into the cave to go to the bathroom. And that is a euphemism for going to relieve yourself. We understand that, right? Well, a British version of the Living Bible actually says that he went in there to relieve himself. But in the original Hebrew, which is kind of interesting, the Hebrew writer of 1 Samuel, which we give credit to Samuel for that, it is the phrase of Saul going into the cave is also a euphemism. It's a euphemism in Hebrew, so it was kind of interesting. It literally translates that he went to cover his feet. And that was a euphemism for the Hebrew language that he went in to relieve himself. So it's kind of interesting that Kenneth Taylor gave a euphemism about a euphemism. And so it's kind of interesting how it all sort of plays out there. But it's kind of interesting that rather than saying in the English that he went to relieve himself, he went in the cave to go to the bathroom. And so it's one of those odd things that you get with a paraphrase. Another interesting fact, and I did one of each of them for each of them. The Message uses idioms in it that are found only in the U.S. rather than in international English, meaning that in China, where English is taught, obviously as a second language to Mandarin most of the time. The idioms or the examples that are used in the message, it may not click with them. They may not understand it because it's not an idiom that would traditionally be used to where everybody that speaks English would understand it. It's ones that are unique to the U.S. rather than English as a whole in the world. And so those are just a couple of interesting facts outside of the others that we've talked about as we've gone through tonight. But we do want to look at the Scriptures. We want to compare the Scriptures. And so in your Bibles, I've always asked you to turn to Deuteronomy 6:5, and you can do that or you can look at them on the screen tonight. As you see there in the middle is the NASB. This is the Shema that we've been using every night. And the NASB, it says, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. The KJV said might, the NIV said strength. But here you see how the Message and the Living Bible are paraphrases. It says, love God, your God, with your whole heart. Love him with all that's in you. Love him with all you've got. You see how much of a difference that is from the original language. Is it paraphrasing it and giving you the idea? Sure. Something interesting that Eugene Peterson, I think it was, said about his work on the Message as far as it being a paraphrase rather than a traditional translation. And it's not touted as a translation. It's not advertised as a translation. It's advertised as a paraphrase. The interesting thing that Eugene Peterson said that I can really relate to, and I understand his reasoning for doing this project, the Message, is that he said what he did by compiling the Message and the paraphrasing of the Bible is the same thing he had been doing for 35 years as a pastor. Standing in the pulpit, reading the Scripture, and paraphrasing it for the people so that they can understand what the Bible says. And that makes sense. And I hadn't ever thought about it that way. And I'd always sort of, paraphrase, just sort of slide it to the side. But that's really what's happening. If you read that there, he's really, you could hear a pastor standing up there telling you, you need to love God. You need to love him with your whole heart. You can feel the emotion out of that coming from a pastor. You need to love him with everything that's in you. You need to love him with all you've got. And that's what a pastor does on Sunday mornings when it comes to the biblical text. He should be paraphrasing it for it to be relatable to the people from what the original text says. So does it do what he intended for it to do? Yes. And so we see with the Living Bible, he says you must love him with all your heart, soul, and might. So he's paraphrasing it. That's another way that we would say that. And so that's the Deuteronomy 6:5. Here is John 3:16. And this is, we sort of have this one sort of, ingrained in our memory for the most part from John 3:16 being so famous as a Bible verse. But look at what he says there with the Message. This is how much God loved the world. He gave his Son, his one and only Son. And this is why, so that no one need be destroyed. By believing in him, anyone can have a whole and lasting life. Now let me ask you, is a whole and lasting life the same thing as eternal life? Doesn't sound like it to me. So let me ask you, if somebody is a new Christian and somebody places the Message in their hands, are they fully going to understand what Jesus did by dying for them on the cross? No, they might get there because of other text and other supportive things, but reading that one, that makes it a little hard for someone who is new to the faith to really grasp the nuances and the truth that is revealed to us in John 3:16. Darrell, show us the Living Bible. It says, "For God loved the world so much that he gave his only Son, so that anyone who believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life." That A in brackets is it's from where I copied it and dropped it in there. That's there's a reference there. If you click on it, that's from the internet. I just I didn't see it and delete it. But it says there, so that anyone who believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. The Living Bible does a lot better job of explaining to us the paraphrase of John 3:16 than the Message did. And so, when you look at that, it does a really solid job there. But then let's go on to the next one. This is Romans 12:1. And remember, we were talking about your spiritual service of worship. So here's how the Message reads. So here's what I want you to do. And this is Paul writing, obviously. So here's what I want you to do. God helping you take your everyday, ordinary life, your sleeping, eating, going to work, and walking around life, and place it before God as an offering, embracing that what God does for you is the best thing you can do for Him. And that's a mouthful compared to what it says, to present your bodies as a living and holy sacrifice. I mean, if we give ourselves, we're going to understand that is every aspect of us. That's our sleeping and eating and going to work and walking around life. But again, this is a paraphrase rather than a word-for-word translation. And then you have the Living Bible. It says, and so, dear brothers, that sounds pretty close. I plead with you to give your bodies to God. Let them be a living sacrifice, holy, the kind He can accept. When you think of what He has done for you, is this too much to ask? And so that one does go a little bit off topic a little bit there, but it still is much closer to what the translations that we're seeing look like. And so, as compared to them, it does sort of towards the end sort of miss the mark on a little bit of stuff there. But you see that, I hope that what you're seeing here is the real difference between a paraphrase and a translation is that it truly is a paraphrase. It's truly the author's view of what that text says and then how they would explain it to someone. And just because it's written doesn't mean that it's, good, bad, or indifferent. It's the way that they would explain it. And, a lot of times, the things that you would read in the Message or the Living Bible would be the way, like I said, that a pastor would share it or a Bible teacher would share it in Sunday school to explain it and to help us understand it. And so with those comparison verses showing us the differences there, we're going to continue on into the pros and cons. As far as the paraphrases go, as far as ease of understanding, we can't argue with the fact that a paraphrase is simple and easy to understand. I mean, when we read those paraphrases, you can see it's easy to read. The fact that I could read it having not read it any more than I had from the screen, while we're talking, I mean, it is easy to read. It's easy to understand from that perspective. And so that is a major pro for the paraphrases. It's a big thing, and that's why it would be good for things like devotional reading. And that is another pro, is that paraphrases are highly touted for their use for devotional reading. And that's something that they can be used for because they're great resources for helping people understand the traditional translations, because you may read something even in the NIV, you may read something even in the NASB or the ESV, and you read it and you're still like, huh? What's that mean? I don't get that. And so you go and you open up a paraphrase, and the author of the paraphrase may word it just a little differently to where you're like, oh, I see what that means there. And so rather than having a library full of commentaries and going digging through them to see what this particular Bible verse means and says and things like that, a paraphrase is a good opportunity to gain that a bit of understanding there. We are in 2023, we are at a great advantage over previous generations on the fact that there are tons of resources online that a lot of times are free when it comes to explaining particular text. There are a lot of pastors who publish their sermon notes online that you can go, and I've never borrowed any, throw that out there. Never used any, but you can go out there, and if you go and Google a particular Bible verse, what you'll find is that you can very easily find sermons, commentary writers, a lot of different things that will help you to explain what it is, what that Bible verse means. And so we have a great advantage over previous generations in that there is a wealth of knowledge available to us. But again, like we talked with the kids this morning at Children's Sermon, you have to be able to discern the truth from lies and understand who's telling you the truth. And so don't just Google the whatever question is that you have and then just read the first one and be like, oh, that's what it means. You need to do a little bit more reading than just that to make sure that some of the ones that you are reading are agreeing. So, but a devotional reading like a paraphrase is a great resource for understanding some of the original translations that may be just a little difficult to understand. May help give you a new light or shed a new light on that. Now, as far as the cons go, the first big one for the paraphrases are that they should not be used for in-depth Bible study. And the reason for that is, I hope I don't even have to explain that. I hope that it was seen in what we saw from the 3 Bible verses that we compared. That, there is a lot missing from the original text and the translations into the English when you get into a paraphrase. Yes, they may get really close on some of them like we saw, but there's going to be some where they miss the mark. And so we have to be very careful about that. If we're doing in-depth Bible study, if we're teaching a Sunday school class, we can't go only off of a paraphrase and assume that that's going to be enough for us to teach a Sunday school class or a Bible study or something like that, and assume that the paraphrase is, enough for me to base my teaching off of, because there is a lot that is missed there. Even though, as I said, that it is good for devotional reading, it can be a good source for that. But for in-depth Bible study, a paraphrase does not cut it. And so I would strongly suggest to stay away, I'm finishing my sentence, to stay away from a paraphrase for in-depth Bible study, okay? Good for devotional stuff, but not something that you want to go and base a long-term difficult Bible study off of. Another con of it is something that we talked about earlier, is that with a single author, there's some real challenges that go on there, because with a single author, what happens is paraphrases sort of have tunnel vision, can have tunnel vision if you're not careful, because when it comes to the original text or the English Bible that is used for the paraphrase, you can sort of get tunnel vision because you're only getting the perspectives of that one author. You're not getting multiple people coming in and saying, well, it really ought to be say this, or I would translate it that way, or I would paraphrase it this way. And so, with traditional Bible translators or translations, a lot of those several of them had over 100 translators laying eyes on the original text. For them to formulate the best translation with more than 100 people looking over the text and coming to a group consensus on it, that says a lot about the translations versus a paraphrase which has one set of eyes on it. And so even though the Message did have 20 people that reviewed the work, I couldn't find how much was changed because of the ones that reviewed it. But nevertheless, that one author makes it sort of challenging because, it's sort of like on a Sunday morning, if I'm standing up here preaching and I say something and you're like, I don't exactly agree with Pastor Nick on that. I don't know that that's exactly right. What could you do? You test it, right? You go, you find some commentaries, and you see if how I taught a particular text is what the Bible is intending in that moment, in that text. Well, what do? You go and you find some commentaries. You do some research, and you'll see either Pastor Nick was going with, the common consensus of Bible scholars, or Pastor Nick's way off in left field. And, it's the same thing with, this single author, is that when you do that, there's, the only way you can do it is to go and see what, it causes us to do some more legwork for them because there was only one author rather than multiple people looking at the text and putting it together. And so those are the pros and cons for paraphrases. And so that is really the end of our study on translations and paraphrases. But I hope that through this study you've been able to really pick up on some of the discussions about what people are saying when they say that this Bible did this or that Bible did that, and I hope that now you're a little bit more grounded in what it means to find a Bible translation, whether it's for you or for your kids or for your grandkids. Hopefully you'll be able to find something that works pretty well for whoever is needing the Bible. And so last week I did have somebody ask about the NASB, and they took it and was looking at it. And so that I had, if you do want to look at any of those other translations until I get my NASB back, feel free to let me know, and I'll be glad to. Oh, Patsy, you're done with it? All right. You read the whole Bible in a week? Oh, okay. So if you're interested in just looking at an NASB, I've got it right now. But I have all the translations that we've looked at through this series. You're more than welcome to take a look at it, and I'll let you check it out of my library, so to speak, and look at it and take it home and just sort of peruse it a little bit and see if it's the right kind for you. You can find all of these translations online with just a Google search, and so if you want to do some comparison, you can, but if you want the hard copy in your hands to do some reading and do some checking, then you feel free to borrow one of mine. I want to give you as my parting information to you a great resource when it comes to online Bible study. There is a resource that I keep open on my internet or on my Google Chrome all the time. It's the one that I use you can actually check the Greek and Hebrew if you know how to navigate through that. But the online resource, it has all of the translations that we've talked about tonight. It has several others that we haven't talked about throughout or it doesn't have the paraphrases, I'm sorry. It does have all the translations that we've looked at in this series. But the Bible website that I use as a go-to is called Blue, like the color, blueletterbible.com. So instead of a red letter Bible, it's blueletterbible.org. I'm sorry. blueletterbible.org, and it is a great, fantastic free resource. And there are even some commentaries on there, although they are in the public domain, which means they are a little older. It doesn't mean that they're not quality. I've used several of those before on a different PC study Bible that I had, a software program I had years ago, and they are on there. And the truths of what's in God's Word and the way that commentary writers have relayed it, on the paper for 500 years or more, has not changed, but it is definitely a good resource. So if you go in there and you're wanting to look at the Greek and Hebrew and see how that worked, if you're on the Blue Letter Bible and you look up a Bible verse like John 3:16, you go and look it up, then you click on Tools, and it's going to pull up that Bible verse and show you the English word, the Greek word, what number it is in the Greek lexicon, which is a dictionary, and you can click on. You can hear how it's pronounced. You can read the definition of that word. You can click on it, and it'll show you all that. If you've never used it before, it's a little cumbersome to learn the navigation. But if you decide to use it and you're wanting a little help, just let me know. But blueletterbible.org is a fantastic source, and so I recommend it to people whenever they're asking about that sort of stuff. And so the really cool thing is that I think you can actually do some parallel comparison between like KJV and the NASB or something else if you want to. And so it's a really good resource. And if you need help navigating it, just let me know, and I'll be glad to help you figure out what you're trying to do. So are there any questions as we wrap up tonight? Any other questions? Any questions? No, I'm just picking. Go ahead, Miss Alta. That's a really tough question. Can I wait and answer it in Q&A in the pastor? No. Yeah. Well, the thing I would say is that if we're trying to be, students of the Bible, and we're going to want to use the sources closest to the original source, which would mean that we would need to go with the older manuscripts because they're closer to the original source. And so, the thing I would say is that we would need to use those. And so whatever translations use the Alexandrian manuscripts that we were talking about would be ones that we would more, lean more heavily on. As far as the not to add a jot or a tittle to the or to remove them from the original text, that is something that the manuscript scribes will have to answer for with the Lord, because we haven't done that. We all we have is the 800-year-old or 1800-year-old manuscripts that they copied from a previous copy. And so all we have are those. And so we have to go off of what information we have at hand. And so as far as that particular text, what Jesus is talking about there, when he says that, I think we have to go with what we have and use what is closest to the source, rather than something that may be newer and, I don't want to say less reliable, but something that is newer and may have some changes to it that are more to make it more fluid in the original language. I think that's the best way to put that. So I would, when it comes to that, I don't know that the manuscripts closer to the original source I don't know that they are perfect as far as jot and tittle and all that sort of stuff, but they're going to be closer to being what the original source was than those that have been copied 1,800 years or 1,600 years after the original copy was written. And so, I wouldn't say that, but I wouldn't put it that way as far as that goes, because again, for 300 years, almost 400 years, 350 years, we didn't have anything else to use. And so there was the RSV at some point in the 1800s, I think it came along. But the King James Version was all there was. And so we can't be judged for using all that we had available to us. And a lot of the manuscripts that are older have been found since 1611. And so with them being found more recently, even though they're much older, I think that what it is, I don't want to say judge, but what we should be judged on is using the best information we have available to us. And so if I know something is newer and potentially less accurate, and I know something else is older and potentially more correct, well, I mean, that causes me to say, okay, which one should I be using? I'm not... Right, yes. Well, maybe not so much the ones that printed it, but the ones that scribed it, the ones that copied it from previous manuscripts. That falls to them. But again, if the people who have put together like the Hebrew, the Biblia Hebraica and the Greek New Testament, where they take all those manuscripts and they try to figure out exactly what the original one was intending for us to understand, the way that they do that really helps us to have a good source to work from, a good understanding of what is there. And so for us to have that critical approach to it really helps with us understanding what's been shared with us. So I would say the scribes that messed up, it's on, well, I don't want to say messed up, but the scribes that dropped off the jot and the tittle, it's on them. And so that's a good question, though. Man, I wasn't prepared for that one, Alta. that was a good one, though. Any other questions from our study on Bible translations and the paraphrase? All right. Well, I appreciate you being here for our study, not only tonight, but through the last several weeks. Let me ask you this. Did anybody learn something new about Bible translations that you didn't know before? The rest of you should have been paying attention. No, I'm just picking. But I hope that it's been helpful. I hope that it's been informative, like I said, that when it comes to picking a Bible for your child or grandchild, or even for yourself, that it will help you understand a little bit more about it. And if I can be of future help on that, I get the question a lot of times, why, Pastor, what Bible would you recommend for such and such? And so a lot of times I'll make the recommendation according to the person that it's being, the question is being asked about. And so going forward, we're going to be into the Q&A with the pastor in the weeks to come, and so that'll be a new series for us. I forgot to do this morning, and so Jessica, I'm gonna mention it now. This is talking about Bible translations. Jessica come to me or texted me, I don't know how long ago it was, months ago, and asked me, said, my brother is in need of a Bible and wanted to know what translation. She had a couple that she had found and was wondering which one would work best. And so she, I made my suggestion off of the two and gave her some insights on Bible translations and stuff like that. And do you want me to share the whole story and everything? Okay. And so the reason she was wanting to get a Bible for her brother is because her brother is incarcerated, and she wanted to put a Bible in his hands, that he needed one. Well, she said she wasn't here the Sunday that we did the Who's Your One, dedication, put our ones on the cross. But she said that if she had been, her brother would have been her one. So she gets this Bible that Pastor Nick suggested, out of the ones she had, I gave her my recommendation, and she got him a Bible and sent it to him, and he started reading his Bible. He got saved and got baptized in prison. And so, correct, right? And so that is just, I meant to share that. We've been talking about sharing it for a couple of weeks, and I keep forgetting, and it just, one thing and another. But it shows you that obviously that the Lord's working in his life, and that's exciting. But it's awesome that Jessica was able to influence change in his life by just putting a Bible in his hands. And so yes, for sure. And if you want to know which translation is the magic translation, you have to talk to Jessica, because I don't remember which one we went with. But no, it's an awesome thing that our church gets to have just a little bit of a part in through Jessica sending that Bible to her brother. And so, with that being mentioned, remember Wednesday night is missions night. Baptist men will be in here. The WMU will be in the choir room, and then next Sunday morning we'll be looking at who the real victor is in the spiritual battles that we face. And then Sunday night we will be into our Q&A with the pastor. And I'm telling you, you guys have laid it on me, and these are like some tough questions. I'm looking forward to digging into some of those this week to sort of formulate Sunday night's message. And so a couple other things too. Next Sunday morning, if you're going to Caswell for the work weeks, we're having a meeting right after morning service, just up front here if you're going to Caswell for the work week. And then secondly, if you're interested in either our next national mission trip or our next international mission trip, we'll be having a meeting on Sunday at 5 and 5:30. It's in the bulletin. The next national location is going to this is an informational meeting to discuss, interest. But our next national mission trip that we're looking to do would be in Vermont, and our next international mission trip would be in Kenya in Africa. And so that's the direction that we're going to have with our informational meetings next Sunday. So with that being shared, I'm going to ask Rob if he would to close us out with a word of prayer, and we'll be dismissed.